Oh, it's just reached the top of the hour, so welcome to everyone who's joined us for today's webinar. Today's topic we're going to be looking at is predictions for 2017. We do like to start our webinar program by looking at what is likely to happen during the course of the year. And we've got our regular predictions panel that's proved very popular over the years. We first ran this topic at the beginning of the year in 2014. And we've recombined the same team now for the fourth year running. So delighted to introduce Martin Hill-Wilson. Martin, welcome from Brain Food Consulting.
Thank you very much, John T.
And you've been studying the trends, studying what, looking at the prediction from your conversations.
Yes, well, as usual, I sort of collect everything starting from about November. Some people put their predictions out pretty early, actually. And I've been reading them up until literally yesterday, so I've got a fairly good spectrum, looking at the customer service view, the customer experience view, marketing, some of the people in digital, and it's interesting picking out the common patterns in all of that, which are some of the things that I'm going to pick up and talk through today with everybody.
And also delighted to be joined by one of our technology pundits who's got his finger on the pulse, which is Tim Pickard from New Voice Media. Welcome to you, Tim.
Thank you, John T.
And you've been looking at the whole range of technology that's been transforming the whole customer service environment.
Yeah, well, we like to think we have our finger on the pulse of technology and what's available, what's valuable, and what we can deliver through the cloud as well. So I will be chiming in at regular intervals.
Excellent. Little bit of housekeeping for anyone. The replay of the webinar will be available later on today, about 3 o'clock. That's callcenterhelper.com/recorded webinars. We are running a chat room alongside today's webinar. That's the address here is callcenterhelper.com/chat if you'd like to go in there. You can download a copy of the slides for the webinar on that link here once you're logged in, which is the download webinar slides button. You can also get a transcript of the chat log, so if you'd like to log in and say where you're calling in from would be great. There's added advantage for being in the chat room as well, that we do have a bottle of champagne or a box of chocolates, your choice, for the best tip, or even for that matter, the best prediction that comes in for the so leave your tips and predictions in the chat room. Just use hashtag tip, hashtag question, or hashtag prediction so we can see which is which. Right, we're going to have a look at predictions. Before we do that, I'd like to jump off to a poll, and I'd like to, if you could predict in 5 years' time, what percentage of inbound calls that are currently handled by advisors do you think will be handled by self-service or by robots in 5 years' time? So do you think it's going to be between 0 and 9%, 10 to 19%, 20 to 29%, 30 to 49%, or 50% plus? So how much do you think that self-service or robots will take over some of the work that is handled today by outbound calls? And the time span we're looking for this is over a 5-year period. Martin, do you have any thought of what answer is going to come up top?
Yes, I do, but I shall hold my counsel until I hear what people say. I've got a very particular view on it, but we'll, rather than spoil my thunder, I'll tackle that when we get to it halfway through the presentation.
That sounds
I'd be
like
interested to see what people say. I'm hedging my bets at the moment.
Hedging the bets. So let's have a look there. So let's share the results up on the screen. Quite fascinating. The result here, most common answer is between 30 and 49%. By almost a third of our audience think it's over somewhere between a third and a half of calls. About 20% say it's between 20 and 29%. There's only 10% of the audience that think it's between 0 and 9%. And actually, a significant number, 90%, say over half of inbound calls could be handled by self-service and robots in a few years' time. Tim, does that surprise you?
It doesn't surprise me that much. I mean, I think 5 years is quite a long time away, and I think we will you know, we have already started to see significant amount of self-service, some robots in this area, and I think as we humans get used to that and adjust to that, then we will expect to see it, and will see it more and more, and it will be provided more and more, and provided that it's supplied in a way that we find acceptable and can work with. I think I can see that growing fairly significantly. I think it's a great development, and I think it's something that that will be valuable for many reasons. But in terms of providing quick access to information, and also meaning that the human helpers can be available for the more difficult, in-depth, challenging or urgent inquiries as needed. You know, which is a desirable state.
So I think some quite profound changes likely to happen there. We're also asking a question in the chat room. If you're not already logged into the chat room, is the address callcenterhelper.com/chat. And if you could just type in 1 or 2 words, what are your key priorities for 2017? We've had a number of priorities typed in earlier. Andy says that enhancing the digital platform is one of the priorities that he's got. Michael has said proactive chat. Marcel has said expanding business acquisition, quality, continuity, and expanding the green way of working, which I guess is probably something like home working. We've got Isaac has said it's CRM integration. Charlie has said the priorities for 2017, launching a new channel, not sure which one that is, and also improving or steadying the NPS or customer satisfaction scores, so looking to improve on that. And he says it's efficiency, keeping down costs, and also quality. And Charlie has said the new channel, by the way, is web chat. So Martin, what's your take on the future trends and where people are working at?
Well, I think one of the things that is interesting about this whole event, in fact, is that you can talk both at sort of market level, but also quite specifically about different sectors and also about individual brands and organisations. And I think all of those will throw up different kinds of answers. I think one thing that's interesting, if you look at it at a sector level, is that the degree to which sectors have been impacted by, let's call, digital and disruption that goes with that, is some people are on different speeds. So I think retail has been forecast to be going through an increasing level of turbulence. So has travel, and typically what digital tends to mean is that people are more online, are more expectant of real-time engagement, are more anticipating, you know, a personalized level of engagement with a brand. And that pretty much starts to change the way in which customer service is delivered. Particularly also organisations, and I think travel is a good example of that, or telco actually, of where mobile and smartphone technology is particularly dominant in the interface between the customer and the organisation. Again, that's a trigger for reinvention. So you'll see different things that are priorities by sector as a result of that, and then also within any given sector, you tend to have the leaders, you know, the people who tend to follow, or the people that have got a different sort of value proposition. Some people still, you know, focus very strongly on purely price, and they think that that's, you know, the way in which they can get through. So I think you get different answers depending upon what people are orientated to and what their immediate peer group is inciting them to focus on.
Well, I guess that now is the time then, talking of the move to digital, to Martin, if you'd like to introduce your thoughts, because I think the move to digital is one of your key drivers early in your presentation.
Indeed, right. So I'll just. Is that visible now to everybody?
Not yet, if you'd like to.
Not yet. There we go. There we go. So, 10 predictions or areas in which I think that things are going to be changing, and we're obviously going to be encouraging you to be thinking about yourselves. So the first one, no surprise, is omnichannel. or whatever your flavor and version of that is. And I want to make a couple of points, really. I think, first of all, I'm going to say that as a prediction, more organizations are going to spend time getting closer to their customers in the sense of understanding how they behave. And the profound change that has happened. And it's no secret to say that, you know, basically as consumers, we've gotten ahead of all organizations in terms of the way that we engage and we communicate. And I thought, just to evidence that for people, I've chosen a really useful piece of research, which I would again advise people to dig into more now, and that is that every year Ofcom produce a couple of reports, one of which is called the Communications Report, and it profiles in this particular instance, you know, our communication habits. And this is interesting because this is a piece of research that says it's not just millennials we're looking at here, we're looking at all adults above the age of 16 and how much time we spend in an average week doing the following kinds of things. And there's some noteworthy things in this which again is worth us thinking about. For a start, the relative decline of texting in favor of instant messaging, in other words, the switch from SMS to messaging platforms, and that's hugely significant because that is also a base upon which a lot of the intelligent assistance in the form of bots is being currently built. The second thing to say, and that, by the way, also is a forebearer of a broader change, which some people are saying that as we move from desktop and we move from laptop and browsers to smartphones, the equivalent operating system in a smartphone universe could well be a messaging platform. So again, that's a topic we might pick up in another webinar in more detail, but that's a profound change. Email is still strong. Notice that we still have a big email habit. And although a number of us are switching email off in favor of chat, in favor of messaging, it's still, in terms of our core consumer habits, something that we do a lot of. We use the phone to some degree in our personal life. And I would also like to shout out the fact that phone calls and video calls are beginning now to become one and the same thing. In other words, within a rich broadband environment where we've got the capacity, our ability to do live communication, you know, in a almost face-to-face way, can either be video and or can be phone. So there's some changes spent there. So the point really to get here is, number one, we are already as consumers quite diverse in our habits around the way that we choose to engage and the way that we choose to communicate. That'd be the first point. The second point is, I think within the bigger problem of being truly omni-channel, and by the way, nobody is yet right now, it's very difficult to do that effectively, I would select the things that really are crucial and matter to customers. So I'm going to give you 6 examples, and I'd like you to think about the ones that apply to you particularly, and then this year focus upon making them smooth with regard to it being easy for the conversation to continue as customers choose to flip channels. Now, this is an example that I've seen lots of, particularly in social customer service, where for whatever reason, the organization is uncomfortable completing the conversation in a public context, and therefore they advise customers to go back onto the phone. They do it particularly strongly in financial services, which is fine. However, the problem with that is it doesn't look very good, and it can also be extremely irritating to customers to be sent back possibly to a queue that didn't work for them in the first instance. And in terms of making it look like you came for customers, just shunting them off in that way doesn't work. Now, practically speaking, one of the things you can do is offer a series of dedicated phone lines that reroute straight back into that social customer service team. So in fact, the person that has initiated the communication on Twitter can also be the same person that then picks up that telephone call. Now that makes a lot of good sense, and it's not technically very difficult to do. And again, if you talk to people in the financial services space, IT generally considers the phone to be a secure line in order to do basically confidential engagement, whereas Twitter, being a public platform, they're not so comfortable with. So again, if that happens a lot and you have a habit of doing that, really look at the experience associated with that and see if you can't make it better and get greater continuity in terms of that conversation. The same will apply, by the way, in the forthcoming world, and indeed, you know, whether or not an intelligent assistant completes an interaction, the likelihood is that they're going to be passing that off to a human being in many instances. So we're beginning to see the less complicated parts of an engagement being picked up by an intelligent assistant, and then we need to escalate to a human. And the point there is, do I need to start again in that conversation, or can I start at the point at which the intelligent assistant has taken it to? And of course the answer should be that no, what we've achieved to date is dynamically populated on the screen for the advisor, and they can just pick up where we've left off. Same thing with, let's say, a text-based environment such as messaging. It might be for some reason that we need to explain something visually, or actually we've got a very upset customer and we want to see them in the face because that will help to build some trust more rapidly. We want to convert from messaging to chat. The same sort of thing. Can we do that? Notice all those three examples are real-time examples. In other words, they're occurring within the moment. Can we make sure that we do a better job on those? Here's three other ones which happen over time. Tim, sorry, there you go. You've got your finger. I can see you.
I gave the signal.
What's that stimulated for you?
I think that's very interesting. I think the point you make around live service interaction and the different types of live service interaction are really interesting points. I would say you made a claim that that providing the continuity between those channels and the context between them is relatively easy to do. Technically, it is possible to do. I wouldn't say it was necessarily easy to do, and I think that the underlying technologies around that, as one of the people on the webinar was talking about, is CRM integration, and that's a really important element between this, because you need that context. You need to provide the single view of that customer across all of those channels, and then be able to provide the contextual link between them and the advisors. And that in real time does have a few challenges. But yeah, I think the point you make in terms of the live service interaction, the ability to be able to switch and manage context is really critical as we move forward in this environment. Yeah.
And apart from saying the big strategic stuff, go get unified queuing, go get proper omni-channel capability, go do CRM, which I think everybody is on some way forward towards. I absolutely agree, but the bit I was trying to do was to pick up, can you do something more tactically, because right now it matters to customers. So on the very first example, I do think it's possible to peel off a couple of dedicated phone lines, which are then just dynamically routed straight back into that one team. You know, it's a bit of an exception to the rule.
I mean, absolutely. Or you know, have a dedicated queue into a particular team that allows you to bypass, or have a VIP state, or some kind of status that allows you to bypass that. Would be technically the way to do it. I'm interested in and sorry to take a bit of time on this, but for those people on the webinar, if they'd like to just in the chat room say what their omni-channel, where they are from an omni-channel perspective, because a lot of our customers have talked to us about it and are moving in that direction, but relatively few are there today.
Yes.
So some use one or two channels, maybe sort of 1 to 2, 1 to 4 plus would be an interesting split of how many people on this webinar are using omni-channel today would be an interesting one.
I guess we had a comment in from Jim who says to tie up with your point you just raised, he finds it intensely irritating to have to go through security checks with chatbots and then have to redo it again when someone picks up the phone. This is the comment on that one.
And what I'm trying to get through is all of these are huge initiatives. I mean, ID&V, biometrics, you know what I mean? It's another massive budget. It's another cycle of this year trying to get the money for it. What I'm trying to say here is I understand the bigger picture of what people need to be doing, but trust me, 30 years in, we ain't done it yet. So I'm just saying zoom in on some of the things that matter today and see if you can fix it in not necessarily the most elegant ways, but at least the customer experience will be better this year.
Got it.
That's what
I'll
keep
keep quiet now.
No, thank you, Tim. It's excellent. I'm not chastising you at all. Thank you very much for that. Then there's the more classic ones that we all know about. I mean, here's the lapse time stuff, which we send an email off, maybe via a website, nothing happens. Guess what? It's urgent, so we try to SMS people. The person that picks a SMS, likely to be a different team, likely to even be outsourced, to somebody else. Are they going to know, again, the CRM story, which is the integrated history, and can see what's taken place already? We find that with letters. We pick up the phone trying to find out, are people able to see that? And then the last one, which is a bit of a soapbox for me, is that the automated one-way SMS is very popular with a whole number of industries, alerting us proactively, which I think is a great thing. But more often than not, those things stimulate us to want to engage back with the customer, with the brand, excuse me. And again, our inability to get through on SMS means we go to another text channel, probably chat. Again, does the person who's running that chat session have any idea about that automated SMS, which could well have been sent from a completely different system? So again, see if you can find where those pinch points are and see if you can close them down faster than later. So there's one whole set of areas to think about. Here's another one on omnichannel, which is consistency of answers, and this is a bit depressing, I have to say. Regardless of the number of channels you're running, make sure that you have consistency of knowledge. And this comes from last year's report from Eptica, which basically says only 23% of the top 100 brands, which were mystery shopped, asking simple questions like, how do I place return? If I place an order online, how do I collect it in store? How do I cancel an order? Not complicated questions. Only 23% were consistent on 2 channels, only 8% were consistent on 3 channels, and nobody could be consistent across 4 channels. So if we're talking about being omni-channel chops, the majority of us are way back down the track. And this is where it manifests. It's a bit like, and apologies to anybody in the medical profession, but I have noticed of late that if you ask 3 doctors, you get 3 answers. What happens in our world is that if you ask the same question over 3 channels, you can get 3 different answers. And that's just plainly rubbish. So see if that is true in your own environment. Be a consumer of your own omni-channel, and if that's the case, see if you can close that gap later. A lot of it's to do with the siloed way in which we organize teams. Right, that's my prediction around of that particular topic. The next one is an obvious one, but it's one that we're still not very fast in responding to, and that's mobile. And I just want to lay out some big facts, basically, that say you've got to be doing mobile customer service. The first is that 80% of us have got a smartphone this year. All right, we're not talking about feature phones any longer. 80% of us have got smartphones, and this is how, again, going back to the Ofcom data, we tend to spend our time. So if you just have a look at this, what clearly we need to be thinking about is that customers are going to be engaging us mainly either off of a desktop, laptop, or a smartphone. And smartphone behavior isn't just the fact that we've shrunk the size of the screen by, I don't know, 80% or something like that. It elicits a whole new set of behaviors from us. Our expectation for the fact that things are instant, they work, are completely different. And therefore, smartphone culture has to change the way in which we do customer service. The other thing, by the way, that just goes into that loop is the fact 4G is now pretty much across the place. That's fast access all the time. You can do it as far as anywhere. I love the fact, for example, in London, in the Tube, you can get access, in the Tube. That's a pretty extraordinary thing. Half of us have already got access on our smartphones to fast levels of broadband. Again, doesn't that change the way in which we choose to engage? Yes is the answer, because here's some more evidence of the fact that now the way that we buy online is nudging up rapidly in terms of the percentage of mobile payments. And the speed at which that's going through is pretty extraordinary. And if you happen to pick up the details on how the Christmas shopping period went, then one of the big stories in that is that mobile predominated. So again, one of the things that we should be aware of is that it tends to be true that the channel upon which we do our buying and purchasing is also the channel upon which we expect to receive service. So if we have bought on a smartphone, guess what? We probably expect to be serviced on a smartphone. And for those of you who think that mobile customer service is just the same as the way it always was, I'd suggest to you it's radically different. And although we haven't quite got the time today to go into it, if you want to go and look at something like WeChat and what WeChat has built as a capability, you can just see how different the world is going to be when we're primarily smartphone and indeed messaging platform based. So again, get on with redesigning what customer service looks like when it's on a mobile basis. Third one, because of that behavior, and let me just pick up the segue on this, mobile phones not only have changed the way we live and communicate, they have changed the way we think. Customers have experienced a mind shift. They expect any desired information or service to be available on any appropriate device, in context, at their precise moment of need. Good thing we're not fussy, eh? So what we've now got to figure out with that change of behavior is however I want to do it, whenever I want to do it, is becoming a much more crucial component, and availability is becoming something that distinguishes a great service experience versus a mediocre one. So here's some challenges. Ubisend is a UK-based messaging solution provider over at Norwich, I think they are, and they did some work last year and asked us what our expectations were around a 24/7. It's a topic that we regularly visit year on year as far as saying, is it time to, should we? And the fact of the matter is, as far as this sample is concerned, over half of the people there are saying, yes, absolutely, we expect that. Now, just to give you some context for that, the sample is probably slightly weighted towards a younger demographic. You know, the 50-plus market isn't very strongly represented, and I suspect that there are slightly more of those folk in the UK because we are an aging population. But nonetheless, if you take the fact that everybody from the age of 25 through to 50 have contributed the majority of answers, half of that group, of which many of your customers will fit into that particular demographic, have said they expect 24/7. So where are you sitting on that particular point? Next one. Chat is being very popular over the last couple of years. A lot of people think that doing chat means that they've now gone digital. And one of the things that we need to be aware of as far as chat is concerned is that if we're going to use it and offer it as a channel, it has to work. And again, going back to some of the insight that Eptica developed last year, it looks like as soon as there's a spike or whatever the condition has been that's precipitated it, we are not available in the way that we need to be available on that channel. And that although it's well known that chat has got a very high NPS, although it's well known that it can look like it's a more cost-effective channel, the reality is it has to be an effective channel if it's going to maintain the goodwill of the customers. And it looks like we're getting to a point where we need to be revising some of our work resource planning assumptions and our ability to be available as and when those customers want that. So there's two examples of availability and getting it right. In some respects, continuing on that theme, let's have a look at another one, which is about proactive. And I'm predicting that more organizations are going to get their heads around of anticipating recurrent patterns of customer need. Because let's face it, I didn't want to phone you anyway. I didn't want to make contact. I wanted to get on with my life. And if you can anticipate that requirement and either eliminate the need for it or proactively communicate, I'm going to be a happier person as a result of that. And the new digital behavioral mindset says that even if you run a great inbound service, that's too late, probably, in a number of instances, however optimized you are as far as that's concerned. So we need to think differently. So you need to get those customer journey maps out on that wall, and you need to be asking yourself the questions, which inbound inquiries can get anticipated and catered for earlier in the journey, or better still, Amazoned, in other words, removed entirely because the best form of service is no service. There we go. And then the final one, just before we have a little break and we have our first poll, is possibly a new category that you won't know, which is called Human Assist. And it really sits within the self-service segment of the way that we do a contact strategy. And it really says what happens when we combine artificial intelligence and that capability with humans. And that's now a new category called Human Assist. And there's two views that are emerging that started last year and no doubt will rumble through the whole of 2017. One is the view that actually AI is going to help humanize work, and I think we were talking about that earlier on. And there you can see examples of text, voice-based intelligent assistants. You've got Amelia, who has got quite a good profile in the UK. That's an avatar-based thing. And then you've got much of the same capability, but not something that the customer would directly notice, in the form of RPA, which is robotic process automation, which again uses some elements of business decisioning and AI to be able to automate typically middle and back office functions. So the net effect of that is that it makes it easier for a customer to be able to get stuff done. It's almost like if you want a conversational middleware that you're offering between the legacy part of an organization and the customer, and the net result is that humans don't have to do such dull stuff over and over. That can be taken up by this kind of capability. So that's one view of life. The other view, let me just give you an example of that, where you're sharing the load. This is from a company called Digital Genius, who happens to be, I think, a Salesforce partner, as it happens. But this is a good example now of how our marketplace is likely to develop. So using a neural network, which is basically, if you want, a great big database sitting up in the cloud, which has got machine-to-machine learning going on, where basically it learns as it goes and starts to notice patterns of behavior, is if you put all of your customer knowledge, service knowledge, into that kind of environment, it gets smarter over time. And in this particular instance, what it's generating is a threshold of confidence in terms of the right answer. And in the two examples you can see there on the screen, the first one on the left being, can I bring my puppy on the flight? That's going to be a pretty static answer. That's based upon a policy that an airline runs, and we're not going to change that answer. So therefore, we're pretty confident about that, and we're going to push that straight out to the customer as an automated answer, with the benefit being that they're not going to have to wait in a queue before they can get that answer. It's going to be available 24/7, etc., etc. On the other side of the page, you could automate that, but on the other hand, there is a judgment there, and the way the system contributes is to say, you know, the seat next to you is available. That's probably because it's actually checking into the, the live seat reservation system. But on the other hand, you still might want to decide whether or not you are going to hand that back as a live answer from you as a person, whether or not you want to tweak that slightly and personalize it, or indeed you just want to approve that and send that out as self-service. And so this is what we mean by human assist. This kind of background activity is going to be buzzing away, allowing the people who are still engaging with customers to be much more intelligent and indeed more productive as a result of that. So there's the example. The other side of life is a little bit more radical, and this is the Gartner perspective, saying that it might be a little bit more than the 50% that we talked about in our original poll. Gartner's actually casting its particular rod a little further out into the pond and say they could see up to 85% of relationships will not require any form of interaction with a human being. So I don't know what the answer is going to be. I think it's somewhere between those 2 points. I would also say that the thing that will definitely slow it down is that humans are used to compensate for poorly designed customer journeys. You know, the old syndrome when you phone a call center, sorry, the system is slow, let me apologize for, let me help you through. That's because you don't yet have a robust journey that you could hand over to a customer, which they can consume in a self-service context. And I still think there's many journeys which fit that category. So the thing that will probably slow down that Gartner prediction is the fact that most of us haven't yet engineered our business in a way that allows customers to engage in a much more independent way. Nonetheless,
Tim, you had a few thoughts on this.
I was just going to add a little bit of colour around some use of artificial intelligence. We use an artificial intelligence engine that allows us to engage with some of the people that engage with us. So if somebody has visited us at a trade show or downloads a white paper or some of those things, then a lot of the interaction is actually handled through artificial intelligence with that person. So there's an engagement. Her name's Anna Brooks. She has a LinkedIn page. She's successfully gathering contacts and has had a few job offers as well, actually, to boot. So this is, artificial intelligence is as Martin kind of laid out on the previous slide, is coming into business environments at a fairly decent rate now, and a lot of maybe a lot of the interactions that you have with businesses are through AI now as well.
I think it's going to be a tremendous boon. I think it's going to make us much more intelligent, and our first call resolution ought to improve as a result of that. With a lot of, it's very difficult to find the right information in the moment, isn't it? I think that's one of the key things that's always been difficult in our industry. But if you've got something behind the scenes, getting smarter, able to push forward the stuff, I think that's going to make a heck of a difference. Okay, so there we go. We've had 5 areas which we've looked at. And John T, maybe if you could take us through that first poll.
Okay, yeah, what we'll do is we'll put up the first poll, and perhaps the best way is tick what you think are the top 2 ones that would match of those with your priorities. So if you'd just like to vote for maximum 2 of those 5 priorities we've had so far: omnichannel, mobile, availability, proactive, or human assist. So if you'd like to pick the top 2 of those, it'll be quite interesting to see what we have coming back. And Martin, have you got a thought which one's going to be top?
Well, I'm going to plumb for Omni, because I think that's still what most of us are struggling with. I think that's going to be top. But second one, I think, is either going to be the availability stroke proactive. I think there might be some interest in that. Okay,
well, there's a bit of an each way bet there coming.
As ever. Oh, there you go.
Omnichannel, no, wasn't top. Was actually very close.
Right.
And proactive, I think, is very encouraging to see is top. Human assist, actually quite well down on the list.
It's emerging, isn't it?
Wonder how much we call now artificial intelligence. We used to just call software. So be quite interesting. Well, let's have a jump across to the chat room, callcenterhelper.com/chat, and let's just have a quick look at some of the comments that have been coming through in terms of some of the priorities that people have got. Daniel has said their priorities are how to manage channel shift to self-service from multiple legacy systems, how it's done, and particularly risk-free. Caroline has said providing proactive customer service. I guess that ties in with the results of the poll there. And adding meaningful value to customer contact. Zoe is looking at culture and empowerment. And Oksana is focusing on digital channels that present the most potential. So I guess tied in there would be chat. A couple of opinions and questions from the audience. Moina has said, I strongly agree with Martin. I dislike the automated SMS or emails that do not reply when all you want to do is engage. So maybe there's a real trick.
It's a rubbish experience.
Yeah, that perhaps we ought to put an email box on the back of it, as long as you can actually you then do proactively do that. Right. Well, I didn't know how far we'd get on talking about 2017 before this question came up, talking about Brexit and Trump. I've tried very hard to ignore this. So, Tim, do you think the civil revolution that has been happening through 2016 will change the course of the 2017 predictions? For instance, are customers or general public expecting more in terms of customer service and feel they can let people know if they're not happy? I know that sort of a lot of the exchange rate has fallen down, which means the cost of imports will be rising, which mean we'll have a period of inflation, which may have threats for jobs. Tim, what's your thought on how is this going to affect customer behaviour?
I definitely think that that we are in a different era, and that citizens, consumers, there has been something of a, as I say, nicely put, civil revolution, something of a backlash against the kind of authority, and I think that does have I think people do feel more empowered to challenge and to question the services that they get. They certainly have more choice around services they get, and feel that switching and ultimately voting with their wallet is the way to go. But there are ways in which they can make those opinions heard now, and I think more and more customers are doing that, which is a good thing, because it means that our challenge in terms of service provision is to make sure that we get it right, and that we understand our audience, what our audience wants, and that we can provide that, and that's the most critical thing.
Now, I think there are going to be some big changes there. I don't want to spend too long on Brexit, so we've got another question sent in by Ellie, and has asked the question: has anyone used video chat for low revenue customers? Martin, I don't know if you've seen any examples of video chat.
Well,
low revenue?
no. The ones I'm aware of, Ellie, are the Nationwide Now for mortgages, which is not a low value revenue opportunity at all. The other one I'm aware of is Shoe. Which has been using video chat for a while now. So I would imagine they don't discriminate purely on your lifetime value. So in that sense, there could be low revenue customers there. There's another scenario which is used quite a lot, is in healthcare, where it matters there. But I would say that when you want to approximate the experience of a face-to-face, in other words, it might be a complaint, it might be want to show some people some stuff, it might be want to build relationships, deal with an emotional situation. I think that video is a good candidate for that. And if you look at the technology underlying that, it is getting cheaper and cheaper now to deliver that. And certainly, once we're getting into our messaging universe, it's an interesting thing that a messaging platform has got video baked into it. So I think that we're going to see more and more of that. But probably your business case may well have to revolve around more of a VIP type customer in the first instance.
And it's also raised separately a prediction that definitely more artificial intelligence services like to happen, and ones that are getting better at understanding different accents, particularly if you put it onto the telephone channel. One final question in this bit before we jump into the next ones. What is the future of avatars in contact centres? I think we saw one there. Amelia, Tim, have you got a thought on this?
So I think that this is something that we're going to see more of. I think that certainly the technology is becoming available, and that we will see more of it in 2017, and probably, obviously, more beyond that. As I said at kind of the beginning of the webinar, I think that that technology is only one part of the solution, and that we need to make sure that we're implementing that technology in a way that that us humans can cope with and that feel comfortable with. And I think that we will see the introduction of avatars over time. Probably, that will be in a relatively short time frame. So I think yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, excellent. Well, we're going to jump back to Martin. I know, Martin, you've got some comments later on about avatars, and in particular the Alexa box in your next part of your presentation.
Yes.
So let's jump in now, and time's moving on, and carry on through the rest of your predictions.
Thank you very much.
You'd like to put your slides up.
Right, there we go. I think everyone can see that. So, social. We've got to say something about social. The only thing I want to say about it is that I think it's gone through quite a renaissance in the last 12 months. More brands who have held off have gotten involved. I think the brands that are doing a good job have seen increasing growth, and for reasons that Tim was talking about, we feel ourselves empowered as consumers, and therefore often use social for its convenience, and also the fact that it can be a point of escalation. I think the point about social that is going to become increasingly important strategically is that digital often has an unwanted byproduct of anonymizing a brand. It's maybe faster, it's maybe quicker, it's more convenient, but it doesn't necessarily build human connection. And last year, I think I did 3 or 4 breakfast sessions on the balance between digital and human touch, and that was obviously something that has become quite topical for a number of people. And so if you're examining in a customer journey, where could you want to remove unnecessary human intervention, because actually that's a badly constructed part of a journey. The reverse of that is also true. When do you want to reintroduce it because it matters? It's emotional, it's complex, you want a relationship build or whatever like that. And social, it has got the reputation of being extremely authentic, of being a place where people go the extra mile for you, and actually, because it's done in a public context, the very, very best social brands are ones that also care about their digital footprint. In other words, the way in which they engage is something that is noticed afterwards by other people, and therefore the footprint that you leave is one that matters, relative to the other statement that says no one can hear you scream in the RVR. So social is a very deliberate part of branding and also of your engagement strategy, and therefore the strapline, social is the soul of digital. That's the only thing I'd like to say about social at this particular point in time. Right, moving on, I've picked out, I tend to think about omnichannel as simplistically in terms of three core media. There is voice, there is video, and there is text. And I just wanted to pick up some of the key changes that are happening in the voice and in the text channel. Bearing in mind, by the way, that all of those three media can be delivered live, i.e. through people, and also through a self-service context. And what I'm concentrating on here with the voice interface is the self-service context in the form of Amazon Echo and or Google's Home box. If you haven't received one of those in your Christmas stocking, go and buy one. They're great fun. They're quite spooky. They're also quite extraordinary in their capability. I was blessed with one for Christmas, and I tell you, it's quite remarkable when you talk to the Amazon version of it. It can hear you from 100 yards away, and it's incredibly responsive. So I've been asking Alexa, the weather in Milton Keynes. I've been asking Alexa to play all of the music that I've downloaded from Amazon. My daughter has been playing extensively with it for various little games and things that she can be doing with it, and it's showed huge potential. America is slightly further ahead because they've been using it for a longer period of time, but you can see from the growth there in terms of the number of units that have already been shipped and the skills, which is to say the ability of a brand to use that technology to allow customers to ask for a particular service, like go and order me a taxi, go and order me this, go and order me that, go and tell me this, go and tell me that, has been extremely strong. And so I predict that really voice interface is going to become an extremely useful way of providing service to customers. And obviously one of the tricks of omnichannel design is to decide when voice is better than text and when text is better than voice, etc., etc. But make no bones about it, voice has now got sufficiently smart that it works out the box. It's extremely compelling, and if you haven't actually experienced that yet, please go have a look at that. It's beginning to change markets considerably. The other thing to say is that messaging is turning up big time, and SMS has always traditionally been, our favorite way of communicating, but now the relative freeness, as it seems, of messaging and the fact that it's got rich media in it in the forms of WhatsApp or Messenger, etc., etc., has really grabbed the market imagination. Here's an interesting stat. Already 1 billion messages a day are delivered, every month, come over Messenger to businesses. Businesses are still sort of catching up with that point. And when we ask people about their appetite for engaging over messaging platforms, we can quite clearly see there's a marketplace that's growing there, and knocking on the door of businesses is quite a large number of people who would be prepared to engage as far as that's concerned. So messaging in all its various forms ought to be examined by you. You ought to be seeing what percentage of your customers possibly on Facebook are open to receiving that. Go and have a look at people like KLM who've been very quick to adopt messaging. It's definitely a up-and-coming text-based platform, and it could well be in a few years' time the platform that dominates and becomes the de facto text channel. Anyway, go and have a look at that. The other thing is, I'd just like to counsel organizations that still think in terms of digital first. In other words, what they're really trying to do is to simply substitute live engagement with more convenient and cheaper ways of doing it. It doesn't cut in today's world, and we need to move beyond that. And there's a very, very basic rule of thumb. Live assistance is not going away. It will remain, and particularly will remain for emotional reasons, for complex advice, and also when it matters around things like complaints. And the percentage that is generated in your engagement with customers will pretty much give you the idea about how much live assistance you're going to have as an ongoing requirement. Self-serve, on the other hand, is becoming very much the way of delivering this 24/7 I want it now expectation around of being educated how to use the product, finding information, and that can, by the way, begin very early in the cycle of things. You know, a lot of the ways that we buy stuff now doesn't require us talking to face-to-face salespeople. We want to have that information made available in an easy way. And task completion is an interesting thing. The amount that we can now do in terms of workflow and just getting things done by ourselves, particularly helped, by the way, by avatars, is getting more and more impressive as life goes on. So we need to get a little bit more finessed and nuanced about the way we think about what digital customer service is. Emotion, big topic. Been a big topic in things like digital marketing for ages. Advertising agencies have very much, you know, risen and fallen on the ability that they have to tweak our heartstrings and make us feel something. And since emotion and customer experience are pretty much, you know, joined at the hip, we need to think, as far as the service component is concerned, what role we should be playing within that. So here's a little bit of work. Not terribly surprising, but I think is noteworthy because it's been done by Bruce Temkin's group last year, trying to identify the specific emotions associated with call experience, time, and transfer. Unsurprisingly, transfers tend to generate fear and anger in most customers. Now, what I think is interesting about this is we need to understand the impact we're having on customers, and one of the reasons we need to understand the impact that we're having on customers is, boom, guess what? Emotion has the greatest impact on loyalty. So if you look at the three things that drive it, and I'm not saying the other two are irrelevant by any stretch of the imagination, success, as in first call resolution, getting, you know, the outcome that the customer wants, absolutely matters to customers, so being effective matters. Effort, you know, that conversation about how much customer effort we require in order to get stuff done, that matters. But the thing that trumps both of those in terms of impacting my propensity to buy more and giving you a decent rating is emotion. So if that be the case, it follows that we need to get more competent at understanding the emotion we evoke within customers, getting better at measuring it, and getting better at managing it at the end of the day. So there's something for us to consider as well. Moving on quickly, so we've got a bit of time for debate at the end. Going digital, I think somebody mentioned that they were picking up their part of their digital challenge, and most organizations have got some big transformation going on at the moment to do with digital, and I'm suggesting that we ought to be looking towards using that to improve the quality of engagement that we have with customers. And in particular, you will see customer journey mapping being an activity within digital transformation. And I'd just like to stress that I think that this is something that contact centers should be playing much more proactive role in. And part of the thing that we're looking to have accomplished here is to make sure that both customer and organization are well represented as we redesign how those journeys are meant to happen. And in particular, as I said to you earlier on, there are many journeys that are not yet fit for self-service, which need to be digitized and need to be simplified before they're going to be made ready for self-service. And so part of the skill really is to also develop maps which aren't acting just as sort of digital wallpaper, but are much more practically useful, that help us to understand what we're doing in the contact center as one of the key touch points. So, you know, as a result of that, we have a changed way in which the customer engages with us. So I think trying to improve the engagement quality that a customer experiences by re-looking at those journeys is again something that people should be spending more time on this year. And then last but by no means least, and in many ways is contextual to all 10 of these predictions, is that of culture. You know, it's a sad fact that whenever you go and dip into the statistics, we're still, as a nation, and I think globally, hovering only around about 30% in terms of the degree to which we engage people at business, which is an appalling statistic. all right? And it's something that we have to do much, much, much more on. And so, again, with a final nod to the Temkin Group, they have decided 2017 is going to be the year of elevating purpose. And it's an interesting one, this, because, you know, it goes back to that old story of what happened when that guy was asked why he was pushing a broom when he worked at NASA, and his answer to that was, I'm pushing a broom to get a man to the moon. In other words, it's not just me doing a dull everyday job. I can see a connection between my everyday tasks and something which is pretty damned incredible. Now, if you look at it, most organizations are in the business of delivering value. You know, there are very few totally superfluous sectors out there. You know, being a water company, if you get into it, is a noble thing, to be providing water to the planet, and water that is trustworthy, and water that works, and all that kind of stuff. So if you work in a water call center, and by the way, I know a few of them, and it is pretty hard work right now, you know, connecting what you do on a day-by-day basis up to the purpose of that business, which then releases a sense of meaning in the work that you do, which motivates you. All of that stuff is incredibly important. And so trying to track, you know, the drudgery and the tension and the stress within a contact center environment into the purpose of the business and finding meaning in terms of what you're doing, I think is an incredibly important role that we have to do in terms of joining those dots and making sure that we keep feeling validated around of that. So more organizations learning how to engage people more fully, particularly focusing upon purpose and meaning. So that's my set, the last lot being social, voice, emotion, going digital, and culture, and I'll hand over to John T to take us through that second set of polls.
Okay, we're going to ask which of these are your 2017 priorities. If you'd just like to vote on the poll. Is it social? Is it voice and text? Is it emotion? Is it going digital? Or is it culture that you're going to be focused on there? So it'd be fascinating to see what the which priorities that are likely to come through there. Certainly, Martin, emotion is one that I've not really heard of the context before, but it makes absolute perfect sense. So yes, certainly if anyone is looking at emotion in their contact centre, I'd be certainly keen to do it and see if there's a correlation between you know, perhaps listening to calls emotionally for emotions in them and looking and seeing if that translates through to a sort of customer service score. Let's close the results here now and share them up. And quite interesting. Going digital is certainly the biggest one there, followed by social. Social still a hot topic, even though it seems to have gone a bit quieter of late. Culture, 47%. Emotion is quite a surprising 41% there, and 22% on voice and text.
Yeah, interesting.
So quite a range of different ideas there. So just a couple of tips from the audience. Charlie says, don't just launch chat for the sake of it. You have to know why you're bringing it in. So don't do it because it looks good and you think you should, because others are, or because it was one of our predictions.
Yes.
Jim said most businesses probably won't get all these predictions done in 2017. The comment on humans need to overcome poor process is very spot on. So I think you know, these are predictions. We're not saying all of them will happen. And Tim, quite a nice one from Caroline, said, don't just gather customer feedback, respond to customers and tell them how you've used feedback to further improve service. I quite like that one, Tim.
Yeah, definitely. Otherwise, people don't feel like they're getting heard or being valued for their input.
In fact, I was having a conversation earlier this week where someone was saying, you know, there should be a very clear business case for responding to every bit of customer feedback. We did some work. The customer lifetime value on average is about £1,000 for a call centre customer. It doesn't cost much to respond to a piece of feedback in comparison to that big amount there. Andrew, one we haven't talked about, Martin, data-driven videos will be a big one.
Wow, he'll have to tell me what he means by that. That sounds fascinating.
I guess that's
personalized.
Yeah, maybe personalized, or even just putting answers to frequently asked questions on YouTube, maybe something like that. And Tua said, contact centers will move to the cloud. Many contact centers use legacy hardware that is close to end of life. Cloud-based contact center solutions will increase significantly. Tim, I think that very much ties with the message you've been saying for about the last 7 years.
We live in hope, Jonty.
Indeed.
I think I certainly, from my experience, that is that the rate of change is speeding up.
Yeah.
So thanks everyone for joining us today. If you'd just like to put into the chat room in 1 or 2 words, what did you like best about today's webinar? There is a replay available later on. That will be in about an hour's time. Certainly a lot of detail there, so you might want to share that with some of your teams, particularly some of the newer concepts like the emotion, some of the artificial intelligence. You may want to share that with your management team so you can get that through. We're doing another webinar next Thursday where we're looking at continuous improvement. Just like to say thank you to our speakers for their predictions. Martin, thank you very much for joining us and for your predictions.
Pleasure.
Pleasure. Tim, thanks for joining in, and as ever, your finger on the pulse inside.
Thank you.
And so thanks to everyone for joining, and we'll see you all again next week. Thanks, then. Bye-bye.